Okay, so we'll start with the labels and resources. So what are the labels? Basically, it's simple. I mean, it's not much complicated. So yeah, just to go into the objective, so we'll be learning about the labels and how to create the labels, best practices for labels. So whenever you're creating a label, so main part is the best practices. So how you should be governed by the best practices, and we'll see the label types and everything. Okay, so it's so see, label files are nothing but a small data structure that can like the related at the new labels in a storage file. What do I mean by that? So let us take an example. So if you have, let's say, you have created a new you created a new table called a sales table, and you have different fields. So let's say in the table name of the table is maybe transaction data. Let's say transaction in sales table. Okay, so this is a label that you have given. This is a label. A label means how you read the object or how is the identifier of the object, but the name of the object can be sales trans. So that can be the name of the object. But label is transactions in sales table or by sales transaction, this kind of. So what, how, so if you go and open like sales trans, and if I tell me what are the data that you are seeing, maybe at the first look you will not be able to understand, right? So what do I mean by sales trans? But if you look at the label, it actually helps me to understand what is the purpose of it. So it shows me transactions in sales table, and this is also very important, like for us also. Whenever we are doing any customization, it is very important to give a meaningful label and meaningful name to the objects whatever you are creating. This is the very basic of the development, because let's say someone else has done some coding or someone else has created some table for you, or some classes, or some created some data structure for you, and after a few years you are working in that project and you are supposed to do some work on that, on someone else's work. Then if you come and see nothing is comprehensible, you cannot understand anything, you do not have any meaningful labels, it is a nightmare for you. And this happens actually in all the work, in all the projects that we work on. So it is very useful to give useful names, meaningful labels, and also identify each object by the nature of it, like why I am creating that. So this is very important. If you go and check any Microsoft created document, they have always said some best practices. This is the label how we are going to create it. These are the labels. So once you go into, you have to first create a label file. So file is basically containing all the labels. So in one project, maybe you are creating your table, classes, data structure like EDT, data types, enums. You need different labels for that, right? So how do you store that labels? You should be storing those label in the label file. So it's like a container for the labels. Okay. So few of the best practices. Let's say we have a table called maybe proj post trans. Okay. This is it's actually a table in Dynamics 365, table in Dynamics 365. Okay. So now, if you just open this table, maybe after you work for few years, it's understandable for you. What do I mean by post trans? Okay, but right now it's not very like easily understandable, right? So how do you understand that? So you should be give a meaningful label name. So what is the label actually? So the label would be, it's like that. So if I give you two things, first thing is this one, project trans, and the second one is table for posted project transaction based on this. So which one is easily understandable? Obviously the second one, correct? But then why don't we give the name like this? Because for the names, it is some characters are allowed. Based on those characters, we should always give the name. So the if you keep like object name as like 60-80 characters is not easily manageable. So that is why the name of the object should always be crisp and clear, based on the like the work you are doing. And the label, the source documentation, all these things should contain all the characters or all the meaningful words which you need to convey. So this is a idea of the label. So one best practice, which is a very common mistake everyone do, is naming convention. Is like very easy best practice. Whenever you start writing something, so Microsoft says you always, the first letter should be capital and then all the other letters are small letters, like how we write in a sentence, correct? So this is a very basic for label structure. So like how we should be creating a label. So but these are small best practices that we need to create. So this is the label and the label file structure. Okay. So yeah, as I was saying, so label files are small data structures that is keeping all the relevant data files and new labels in a storage. And labels are themselves reference from the element or that point back to the label file. That means, so whenever you are creating a label ID is generated and that ID is stored into that label file. So that we'll see. So yes, so so again we go back to the fleet management scenario. So how do we, so we create a label file, create labels when needed if I creating any label, and then we do a build. So that is a structure. So how do you reflect those tables? So we generally don't go and create labels actually. If we have an object, if we have to give them some meaningful name, then we go and create this label files. Okay, this is the structure. So best practices, this is very important because whenever you will be working in projects, you will see, whenever you go and see, there are so many labels created, and based on the best practices, Microsoft throws you so many best practices. So if you remember, like last week we were discussing the build structure and everything. Whenever you do a build, you have your errors, you have your best practices, all these things. If you have your best practice checks or best practice errors, still you can go ahead, build your customizations and do a deployment. That is not a problem. So you go develop, you do not care about your best practices, but still you can go ahead and implement your solution. That will not be a problem. But if someone else is very vigilant about the best practices also, then you can enable this best practice check and you will see the best practices. And for labels, there are so many best practices we have to incur. And maybe after development, you have a big project, you are creating so many objects, and then whenever you see that there is some issue, then you come back to the level and you start rectifying those best practices. So best practices, so label for every element. So this is one important thing. So whenever you are creating the elements or the objects which I told you, so let's say in one of the project, I can give an example. So you have your project one, and I have my created like, let's say three EDT you have created. EDT is extended data type, like how we give our date type, integer type, all these things. I'll explain that tomorrow when we discuss this EDT. Then we have maybe two enums. Then I have created one table out of it, one form, two classes, one job, and one menu item. So this is kind of a small structure of a small customization. So it's like if you are building something from scratch, you have to have a table uh, to store the data. So when you are storing the data, you have to have columns against those table, right? How we store the data, for that we have created our DDT now to show you the table in the front end, like how we were talking about the client, right? So see that table, how to store the for the users, I need to have a form. To write the business logic, I need to have classes. To test something, I need to have a job. So job is just nothing but your like runnable test classes. You can go and run your job and have to see how the data is looking into. And you have to against that form, you have to bring that form into the front end and attach it to somewhere, right? In some of the modules that we have seen, we need to attach that. So I have to create a menu item for this at that. So it's kind of a small structure of a small customization that you will be doing. So if you see, you have created how many, 5, 7 and 4, 11 objects you have created, right? So 11 again under the enum also you will see there will be like 3, 4 different types. So actually you are creating objects and elements with it, right? So Microsoft says always whenever I create my different objects, I should be giving it different labels files. Okay, so this is the best practice. I should be always create and like and give meaningful names to it. This is the first thing. Second thing is so label contain the appropriate translation or activity. So another thing is the translation. So for the label, so what do I mean by that? uh, this Dynamics 365 ERP is a global ERP. It is not limited to any one country, correct? So excuse me, if you think that okay, it is only it only allows English as a language, whatever you are creating in English, it's not the right thing. It allows all the major languages where you can see the data. So we have seen different local customization, like if you go to European countries, maybe Scandinavian country, Denmark, Sweden, all those things, so they prefer their complete solution to show everything into their own language, right? So if you see like my posted project transaction, this thing, right? Posted project, this label, they will want this label into their own Swedish or Danish language. Or if you go to China or if you go to Japan, so they will want to see this label into their own language, because some of the users might not be comfortable in English, so they are comfortable in their own language. So that facility is also there. You can create the label into different languages. So it's like you are working as a developer, you create the label like this and you set the language ID or the country ID for maybe the Danish or Swedish. So whenever you create that label, you assign that to some project and you attach it to the front end based on the language code. It will show you based on that language. Okay, so this is also very important. So create the label based on the region code, or what we call as a appropriate translation. So translation of the label into the different region code is very important. Okay, yeah. So we'll use labels on programming for all external strings. So yes, if you are actually creating or writing logic or doing any programming for external strings, or I mean external any web application, you would definitely go and should create a label and same name associated model. The so whenever you are creating the label file, so the model should be under that model. When you are creating that label file, it should be meaningful label files, so that you are always understand. So I created a new model. If I give it a model 1 or test model, so the label file should contain based on that model. So all the labels whatever you are creating, it should contain under the test model, the test label file actually. Okay, so this is the structure. So this is on how it be most of onto labels. So resources is nothing but it's a small thing, like we generally like cover it in one. The labels and resources is in the front end, you have your pictures or icons, you can add those things, right? So let's say if you can go ahead and let me show you something so you'll understand. Okay, let's say if I show you the front end, you will be able to understand. Okay, so let it open. So yes, resources is nothing but your picture icon and visual representation. So if you have if you want to add any, so if you remember whenever the Dynamics 365 screen opens, you have a picture comes up. Like by default, Microsoft gives a picture and that picture pops up. So for your organization, maybe that is not enough. You need to have your own organization picture, organization, those visual representations, so that you need to create a resource for that. Simple. So, but this is like very small scale use. It's not used very often, but yeah, we need to cover that. So, most important thing is how we create a label. The concept of label, how we create a label, why we create a label, and the best practices what we have covered for this. So every element should have a separate label. It should be in the same model whenever you're creating, and the appropriate language id translation and all these things is very important. And whenever you create an object, ideally you should be having a label. So if your label file is blank, Microsoft gives you any blank error id. Okay, so this is the small thing. Okay, for the resources, yeah, so any same similarly goes for label file. You have a resource file for the resources. So whenever you create a solution explorer, create a new item, you select a resource file and change the name of the resource. So that is actually uh, applicable to the resource file. So let me show you that. Okay, what is happening? Why it is not logging? Okay, what is happening here? Yeah. Okay, okay, let me, maybe it's not opening something. Okay, so let us show you few of the labels. Okay, so this is our application explorer, right? So whenever I was showing you, so remember this is what how we call it an AOT, right? Or all our objects lies here. Correct. So this is my label file. So if you see, this is all these labels are created by like Microsoft. So if you expand that label file, you can see all this based on each model. See, based on each model and each project, they have created so many label files. All my labels are stored into that. So let's assume anything for but sales. Yeah, see, they have a sales and marketing. See, all these different language. See, EGB, all these different for language. They have created different label files. IN, IE, all these things they have created. So let's assume if I want to something related to my organization, nothing for organization. Okay, nothing for organization, but for official uses, official pages, we have this all these different label file for different countries. So let's say something for warehousing. Yeah, see, for warehousing, we have all this level warehouse extension law based on the different workload. Okay, so this is the idea behind it. So how to create a label file and what is the meaning of the label file. So it's just see, again, if you go and work in the system, if you do not have a label, it is still fine. You can go ahead and do that. It's not that Microsoft will stop you if you are not having any label. But for forms, menu item, whichever you are actually showing it into the front end, you need to have a label. If you do not have a label, Microsoft by default gives the name as a label and it shows you there. But as a best practice and as a development best practice, we should always give a label for each and every object. So as an example, if you have created a pros transaction, this is the name of the table, and if you do not give a label for that, or if you do not give proper source documentation for that, so what happens? Someone else comes and he will not understand, but your development work will not stop for that. It is still fine, you can go ahead and do that, but you should be giving proper meaningful name. So this is something very important, and if you do not give a label, if it is that blank, so Microsoft throws you that best practice errors. Okay, so then we'll quickly go through few small questions. So I want everyone you to answer that. So resources in dynamics primarily which of them? So anyone?
Part of label
It's
files.
lead, picture or icons stored in the system.
These
Yes,
pictures
it's
or
always,
icons.
yeah. Yeah, this is again, as I was saying, this is multiple version, yes. During language settings, so we have that.
True.
Label should be created and used for all elements. Base scenario for all elements that you create. It is always for all elements. This is the best practice. These are all best practice questions basically. That I only for elements, only for whenever you see only. So this is not the right approach. You should create labels for all the elements. Okay, and then we have the last one. Okay, these are the last one. Then we will go to the base enumeration. So that will explain. So let me just quickly stop the. Okay, can you hear me?
No, I think I
Okay,
Yeah,
can you
was
hear
now
me
we
not
now?
able to
Yeah,
hear you.
yeah, I
Now
was on
yes.
mute. Okay. So yeah, few of the slides there is six. I was just talking for you to almost 1 minute. Okay, so few of the slides actually I've deleted because those things is not needed now. So to they explain to explain you. So main thing is just to give you the idea of the enum. So enums is one of the most important data types. Okay, so what is an enum? To explain you is the best way to create a small structure of data and show you why it is needed. So it's nothing but when you have storing some data, let's say based on the date, the amount and the payment method. So under the when you go to payment method, you have a predefined list. Simple, it's a predefined list how we do it in Excel. So if you can define a list, you can fill the values like payment method, cash, wallet, UPI, all these things. If you go to this field also, I can see and I can select any one of those. Let's say I select cash. Here I select UPI, I select credit card, all these things. Here I select debit card. So these fields are coming automatically in Excel. How we'll do it? We'll just simple just create a list of data, and based on that we create a data validation list. So this is coming for a data validation list. If you do not know how to do it in Excel, like you just simply Google it like data validation list. How we do that? It will give you this list. Like you simply go to data and do a data validation list from that. It's easy. So what is the purpose of that? So purpose is I do not allow any other values to be entered here. This is the simple purpose. I want my users to always see and like fill all the data from the predefined values. This is my purpose, right? So if I give you write it down, so what is the purpose of my purpose of enum? Predefined list of values, no change. Okay, so this is the main purpose. So why I am using this one? So if you understand this, that this is nothing but any commercial website, if you go and you will have multiple of these examples, right? So if you go to Dynamics X, so to represent that, we call it as a base enumerations, what we call as enum or base enum, right? This is the idea behind it. So enums are, as I see, this is, let's say, like a definition we have set up. It's like a for set of values. This is very important. This is a field set of values, and these are very like small important, I'd say, question comes into every interview. So once you have a set of data type, how do you represent that? So these kind of questions keeps on coming. So let's say if you have given a fixed field values, then how do you define that? How, what do you set those values, right? How do you create that? So that is why we should be like very like understand the enum concept to the core. So this is very important, and we actually go and use it on a day-to-day basis. Because if I show you this table, this is a very small one, like 3 tables, but we have to sometimes create tables maybe 20-30 columns, and here you will have so many different columns. If you go and there you will have multiple different fields which are of type enum, and you need to understand which values to be given, which values to be shown at the top, which values to be shown at the bottom. Those things are also very critical, right? So that is also very important. So yeah, so again, enums have a name and label. As I said, all the objects should have a name and label, and for enum, label is one, like one step ahead, and it is very important for us also. Like I'll show you how to give the labels, but this is very important. And internally it is stored as integers. So this concept I'll explain more. So how that is stored in the database, and how we are actually seeing the values. Okay, so the concept of enum, I hope it is clear to everyone. It is just a representation of my fixed set of values. I allow users only to select the values based on the predefined values which I have given. That is the idea. And we write codes based on these values actually, right? So whenever I go to my system, I try to create something or do something, I need to find my right enum. Based on the enum data, I need to write my logic. Take an example. If I go and write some code based on my date, so I have this, okay, this is all the same date, but if I have different dates for all the lines, I have different amounts for that. I cannot go and write a code based on my amount or whatever amount I have given. I can give conditions like maybe more than 100 or less than 1000, but in that condition I will have thousands of transactions, correct? Similarly, for the date also, I can write a condition based on the range, that based on maybe first of this month to end of this month. So kind of conditions I can. But for enum, I know what are the values I have already. So based on each value, I can write my own logic. So if you want to, if you someone knows how to write a query, so this query is nothing but you are fetching a record. So let's say I want to fetch a record, whatever like payments made out of cash which are more than 300, correct? So if you write that logic, so first filter what you have to give, the payments which are more than 300. So these two values comes up in the filter, and then which is made out of cash. So I can give this one. So this, for the amount, the range I have to give more than 300. Again, that is a range. That is not a fixed value. But for payment method, I can easily go and write the logic based on my enum value, which is fixed and which is cash. So this is the value which I can write, go and write the logic. So this is the purpose of enum, and this is very important for us to understand this enum concept. Again, the labels, as I was explaining the label part also, it is visible to all users and also translatable into different languages, which we just seen, because these fixed values are actually being seen by the all the users on into different countries. Okay, so yeah, so again, it is the first number is always zero, the next number one and two and so on. I'll explain that more in the next slide. So yeah, so this is the objective. We are creating enums, showing enums, and we did the shapes. Okay, then this slide is important. So how we are storing the data. So in database, as it shows stores as 0, 1, 2, 3, but in the front end in the screen it shows as ABCD. Okay, so this is the idea. So that means let me give you an example. So I can see this data from credit card, UPI, debit. I have defined it list somewhere, right? What do I define? I have defined here only, correct? I have defined here. So this is the values which I am seeing now. This is for the users, and for the database, cash is the first value, right? So here I can, it is stored as 0, then it will store as all the other values. Okay, 2 to 4, it starts with 0 to 4. Sometimes what happen, the first value, if you select any drop down, you see it as a blank, correct? So how do we do that? So then we need to remove cash as the first element, and we need to keep an element, and the value should be blank. So how do we do that? So let us maybe remove this one. I select as blank, right? And if I remove this blank, now if you go and select here, it shows us blank, right? But this value, this blank value, whatever label you are giving to that blank, it shows here. So for us, whenever I create into the dynamic system, so the name, let's say in the store in the DB, and this column should be as label. So for blank, my label should be empty. It is a blank value. Okay, so this is the part which you are actually seeing in the dynamics screen, the label part. Whenever I create the enum, okay, and this blank value, the label I keep this as blank. So this is for my like own understanding, right? And this is for the user to see. So for some time, because the first value by default it comes the first value, right? And by default the users maybe forget to change the values, maybe from cash to card and all those things. So that is why I keep the first label as blank. So this is kind of a best practice which we need for labels which are having many characters, many lines, right? So this is the idea. So if I have different values, I can create the first one as blank and the label should be as 0. Okay, so this is the idea. Okay, if we have understood this,
Mitra,
then
having one query here. Sorry, can you just go back to the Excel once again? Let's say in your sheet 2, under the fifth row, let's say replace credit card with wallet and replace wallet with credit card. So under the labels in the D column, when we will be displaying the same on the user screen, will it be sorted alphabetically there, or how it will be displayed?
it will be shown like this one. It will be shown like the how you are giving the numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. It is not alphabetical. So as I said, in the database, it is as an integer, as a number 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and whenever I create the drop down, it will be shown like this. And as you are saying, you duplicate this. So I give it here a wallet, and
Mhm.
if I go here,
Okay. It will show like this only, right?
it will show like this. Yeah. So
Okay.
for the users, this is like, again this we are exchanging the labels by mistake. So if the users is based on the wallet, but in the database, it will be showed as the value 1. And for whenever we want to go and write something for it, we use as a credit card. So it's just a mistake for our storing of the like the database storing from our part. But for users, it will show like this. So it is never alphabetical. It is always based on the values 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. How we are sequencing this. Okay, so this is the idea. Okay, just remember again, this is also very important. Whenever it is like in Dynamics AX, Dynamics 365, if you go try to write the coding, you will able to find these values like what are the enum values you have given, maybe cash, credit card, that thing I was showing you, right? So that you can select and work on that. But in the database, the SQL database, which I mean, so for Dynamics, the database is SQL Server. We all know that, right? In the SQL Server, if you go and try to find the values, it will be stored as 0, 1, 2, 3. And in SQL Server, if you want to write a query, SQL query, maybe, and bring the values and just maybe writing small query and try to understand what is happening there, you have to write the condition based on the values 0, 1, 2, 3. So you should know that value. So if you go there, it will show as a 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay. But in Dynamics 365, you can write the logic based on this one, based on this its values, blank user value. But in SQL Server, your logic should be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 based. Okay, so this is very important to know. Okay, see, these are like an example of enumerations. Like I know right now you understood like mostly any types, statuses, codes, no yes, this radios, all this thing, list item 1, 2, 3, 4. This is like an example from a screenshot from Excel actually. All these things are actually or enum types. Whenever you see these things, you can see these are the enum types. So no yes, actually by default Microsoft have created an enum called no yes enum. So if you can go, if you select two values, you will see only two values which are no yes. The status sales order status, I can show you, you will see there will be fixed set of values. Posting type, ledger, all these things different. Again, this is coming from an enum value. And these enums are actually very important to understand, because few of the status types, if you create once, you can use it into different development. Again, it should be under the same model that is taken. So again, if let's say if you have created a status which is used in different cases, and maybe 3 or 4 developers who are working in that, in the same model, definitely. So if you create is enum for status, that can be used in all the modules, and the same values can be used by all the developers, and they can use to write their code based on that. Okay, so this is the idea for this, all these enums. Okay, yeah, the best practice, again, this is very important. Yeah, constant to be a numerator. So as I said, the constant values or the fixed state of value should be enums. Numeric constant is, yeah, this is important. So if I see, let's say if I have some values like 1, 2, 3, 4, which are fixed values, in that case Microsoft like don't suggest to give enums, because in database it is also stored as 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, correct? And uh, in table, or the data which you are seeing here, it is also stored as 1, 2, 3, 4. So that is actually not good for us to do, right? So that is why the constant values 1, 2, 3, 4, those values we should not select as our enum values. So that is important to know. Okay. So this base factor is important. So never use the constant instead of enums. It's the same thing. If you have the constant values, definitely you should go for enums. There is no other way of this. This is the Microsoft recommended practice. You should not have any other option just to go for constant values for enums. Okay. Yeah, do not make boolean test. Yeah, this is important actually. So boolean test, like if you have like 0, 1, this, let's say boolean, I have say 0, 1 or no yes. So Microsoft for no yes already have an enum, but for 0, 1 you do not go and create an enum for 0, 1 value. So let's so your values are like 0 and 1, and these are your values. In the database also it will be stored as 0 and 1, and in the label also if you give 0 and 1, correct? So this is not recommended. So Microsoft don't suggest to do that, right? You can create an enum like which says as maybe 0 1, but don't give this like numerical 0 1. So this is not. Yeah, and we cannot compare and assign enums of different types. This is also important in writing codes. You will again try to come up and you will find these errors actually. So we cannot compare. This is actually very important. So I write that and compare different enum types. So as an example, I have my sales status, and also I have my posting status. Okay, I have my values like sales status as maybe three different set delivered, if the status is invoiced, if the status is created. My posting status can be if that status posting is in draft, or it is already posted, or it is in transit, all these things, right? I cannot go and in the code I cannot create or rather compare these two values, these statuses. This is not permissible by Microsoft. Okay, this is one important thing, so you should remember we cannot compare. Yeah, so again remember these values constant. We cannot make the boolean test and do not compare this enum values. So let me quickly show you some enums. Okay, Ashok, okay, am I audible to everyone?
Yes.
Yes, now you
Yes.
are audible.
There are
Okay, okay, so this is in base enums. So if you have seen, so this is one of the data types. So let me show you like the very common user, let's say in sales. Yeah, sales type, this is very. So if you see, this is in sales type, and if you see, if you scroll this, see these are the values. Okay, these are the values of that enum. Okay, so check this part. You just check the properties window. As long as you are also see this delete means it will not come. So this is field has been deleted. These values, this journal, subscription, sales, item request, all these things. Here we only have this label, correct? This is how we are showing it. And then this is the label ID. So if you see anything like that, it is a label ID. This journal, subscription, everything. This part is actually, I was telling you about the values, right? 0, 1, 2, 3. You will not be able to see this 0, 1, 2, 3 whenever you after you create the enum. Okay, so this is very important to understand. But once you go back to the database, SQL database, you will be able to see. But remember, whenever you see these values like this, it always the data is stored like 0. Journal should be 0, then it should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that. This is the idea. Okay, and anywhere if you are creating this one, the labels for the enums is a must. If you do not have a label, it should be it shows as a blank in the label. So this will be not. Another very important is order type. You have the sales or return. So this is for sales that is going to show the sales or return. Just give me one moment. Hi. Sorry for the interruption. There's something came up. Yeah, as I was saying, so this order type, all these things, whenever you see these values are stored like this, but in the front end you see this label. If I give you a label as a different country ID, it will be showed like this. So this is the concept on the level and how we can storing the data. So again, we'll have a few questions. So I want everyone to take a part of it. Yeah. So anyone, this one, want to take this up?
numeric values.
Numerical
Maybe. as a numerical value.
Correct.
as a numerical
Always doesn't include values, but in our whenever you see that, it will be as difference reference. What is the answer of this?
False.
Yeah, this is false. First one is
false.
always, it always start. Okay, yeah. Anyone?
A. Posting type.
And not one. We can select the status also, and the codes also. Any codes we can rate to vendors. All these things we can be also use. So remember type, status, codes which are predefined. Always we can go and use that. Okay. So this is for labels and enums. So just give me 1 minute. Actually, someone is at the door, and I'll just come back and we'll take the questions after that.